Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning. My name is Tim Wilson. It is Monday, September 19th, 2022. And today I am really excited and very grateful to welcome Christine Fairchild to the People in Fundraising Professional Conversations program. Hello, Christine.
Hello, Tim.
How
Hello,
are
everybody.
you?
I'm really well. I'm really delighted to be here. And it's especially nice to see you again, Tim.
Oh, you as well, Christine. It's been a few years, and before we went live with the recording, as I often do, Christine and I were just chatting up. It's been almost 12 years since we last worked together. And before we get into the human interest professional conversation piece of these podcast interviews, astute or not so astute of watchers may see that there's a flag behind me today. And I'm a history geek, and I also love flags. This is the flag, the Cross of St. George, which makes up part of the United Kingdom's Union Jack. Christine is joining us from England today, where she is the Director of Alumni Relations for the University of Oxford. For our purposes today, I wanted to get first a sense from Christine what it has been like for you as an American living overseas in England during the time of Queen Elizabeth II's passing, and all of the ceremony, the pomp, the somberness, the nostalgia, all of those emotions that you've experienced over the last almost 14 days.
Well, it has definitely been quite a period of time. I think there are some people who would say this period has been too much of an emphasis on the sort of somberness and the solemnity. Literally, radio stations dialed things back. We had today was the service, the funeral for the Queen. And, Heathrow canceled their flights. They're going to do so again tonight when the service happens in Windsor. So there are people who would say this has been too much. And I think I've just been really moved by it, to be honest with you. I think partly because she does represent so much for this country. And I thought was so interesting was people weren't necessarily mourning. They were, of course, mourning her loss, but they were also celebrating her life. A lot of these last few days have been around the celebration of what she's accomplished and what she represented. And that I think has been extraordinarily important as sort of a moral leader, if you will, somebody who had in her mind a true north that she followed literally every day, and did so with the minimal amount of complaining, as far as I can tell. She was just extraordinary. And so it was a privilege to be here at the end of her life and to see how she's been remembered and how people have flocked to celebrate that experience. My niece from Norwalk, Connecticut, flew over on Friday and spent 13 hours in line to attend the vigil in the hall, and she said it was the most extraordinary experience she's ever had. Alas, I couldn't go because I was doing what I do, which is we were having our big alumni weekend this weekend. And so I couldn't go anywhere. I was staying right here because we had about 1,500 people registered to come. So it was a really interesting dynamic to try to carry on with something very sort of that was meant to be a healing experience for alumni after 2 years of COVID and not being able to see each other and all this, to come back together again, but do so against the backdrop of this very somber occasion. So it was quite an interesting time. But I've loved being here now, Tim, because of that it's so English. My goodness me, it's so English. And nobody does a memorial service as well as the English. Nobody does. The pomp,
Yes.
the circumstance, all of the colors that are so vibrant, the music that is so reverential and so inspiring, and those little boys in the choir and their beautiful descants during the hymns. It's amazing. Yeah.
Wow, that is beautiful. I am so glad that you took the time to share those experiences, those sentiments, and to hear about your niece. Like, that is amazing. And I think, a lot of Americans, to one degree or another, of course, have gotten riveted by the Queen, her passing, but also, just like you said, as the way the English people, the English culture, the extent that it goes to memorialize people of historical significance. It's amazing. And I'd be remiss with my last name. It's a very English last name.
Yep.
Although I like to admit that it's kind of from the border of Scotland too, so it's not just
excellent.
way back
I think
in
that's
the
a
day.
good combination or good location. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Christine, thank you again for that timestamp of where you are right now, personally. But also, I was very struck that I didn't know that you had just had this major alumni weekend as well, in conjunction with all of the services for Queen Elizabeth II. So I'd love to have you talk about that. So as the Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Oxford, I did it again, University of Oxford, what was that like in terms of, the attendees, that their buy-in to the event? Did you have people that said, due to circumstances, I won't be able to attend? Or was there more of a cohesiveness, a feeling of, we're all going through something personally, but also on a national level, and having Oxford give us this forum to reconvene after COVID and to be together during this time of national sentiments? What was that like this past week?
Well, it wasn't straightforward at all. So part of the tradition around when the monarch dies is that senior members of state, senior government officials, have to step away from any public speaking engagements. So with the death of the Queen, what we ended up with was having to cancel a number of our events because we were going to feature either members of Parliament, or we were going to feature, there was Chris Whitty, who is the senior scientific advisor to the government. He was supposed to come and speak, and he had to cancel as well. So we ended up with having to sort of, absorb those changes at the last minute and manage the sort of expectations of our audience, who were really disappointed that happened. There obviously were some people who decided to not travel to Oxford because either their plans changed because maybe they were associated with the funeral arrangements, or transportation was messed up as a result of the Queen's death as well. And there have been a series of union strikes as well that made travel very uncertain for a lot of people. So there were a lot of factors that were going into play that made this particular event not the great reunion that we were expecting or hoping for or praying for, really, but more of this sort of a bit of a kind of a halfway house kind of thing. We had, as I said earlier, 1,500 people sign up. It was also the first year that we were going to do something that was a hybrid event, where we were going to be doing quite a lot of live streaming as well as in-person experiences for people. And so we were experimenting with new technology and trying to be sure that we were giving people the experience that they deserved. So we found that we did lose a lot of the in-person people that we were expecting. We probably had, I want to say it was almost, we could have lost close to half the people who'd signed up who ended up not coming. But then we gained, on the plus side, we gained a lot of digital viewers, which was great. And in fact, we found that we gained something like 30% of the online viewers were brand new to us. We'd never engaged with them before in any way, shape, or form, which was really great. That was in fact something we were striving for, to have a large number of that.
Awesome.
But we all were hoping this was going to be the event that was going to get us back into the groove of being back together again, and sort of almost like muscle memory, where you would remember what it felt like to be back together again. We were just going to get right back into the swing of things, but instead it was this really kind of confusing and challenging experience to try to meet the changes every day that we were facing. So I think we found that this year is going to end up in the history books as one that won't be a smash hit, but will be special for different reasons, probably.
Yeah.
I should also say that one of the challenges of the University of Oxford drawing or inviting alumni back is that the university is set up in this extraordinary sort of decentralized way. You think Harvard is complicated with every tub on its own bottom. Well, Oxford is that, and more so, that on steroids. It's got 39 different colleges. Each of the colleges is pretty much the home base for the undergraduate experience, and you apply to study in that college with a tutor specific to your study, and you live and eat and sleep and study and do everything in your college. So the affiliation as an undergraduate is first and foremost with that college, and the college is really, if you will, they think that they sort of own that alumni relationship. If you're a graduate student, you're obviously more affiliated with your department because you've come from another institution probably, and you're going to study something very specific that is often either leading you into a profession or supporting you as your in your intellectual curiosity. So your affiliation then might be with your department first and foremost, and maybe a little less so with your college, because you're maybe not living in college because you're living out of college. And the university as which is what I work for and represent, is sort of, we bring the sum of its parts to alumni. But it means that we have a sort of complicated way of engaging with people. We have to acknowledge and celebrate the many affinities that alumni have. And that in the Oxford sense is one that's very siloed in a certain respect. We've gotten much better at that over the years, and getting more coordination and more sort of a symbiotic relationship where we understand and appreciate that alumni have multiple chambers in their hearts, just as we used to say at HBS, where we would, I remember Howard Stevenson talking about how, HBS doesn't have to be number one on your list, but if we could be somewhere on your list, that would be great. Because we appreciate you have an affinity with your undergraduate institution, also with your local hospital and your museum and your children's school and your school and blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
So it is here too, but they've been very slow in coming to terms with that multiple affinity approach. The institution has struggled over the years with really accepting that.
Okay.
So it means that, while we would say that, Oxford is sort of home base, Oxford is where you come back to sort of find the answers to the big questions in your life or in your mind. Internally, we're still stumbling over each other. And we still have a lot of work to do to really get to that kind of seamless experience that alumni can have with the institution.
That is fascinating. And the only college I know by name in part of the Oxford universe is it Magdalen? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it's not Magdalen, it's Magdalen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. It's funny that you should say that, because and why do you know Magdalen?
I think because as an American, as I've seen that name, I thought it was be pronounced Magdalene, like Mary Magdalene, and then to find out that it's Magdalen, it just has stuck in my mind.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, are there officials at Magdalen College that you work with to try to bring those alumni into the full Oxford alumni experience?
Yep, absolutely. So every college is its own little ecosystem. There's they call them a head of house.
Okay.
But they have funny names. Like, you can either be the president of Magdalen, or you might be the warden of Rhodes House, or you might be the master of Pembroke. I mean, it's really quite bizarre how unique each of them are. And no matter whether you're a man or a woman, you have that title of master or president or warden or something. Anyway, so each college has its own environment that is headed up by this head of house, and then the fellows or the academics that fall underneath that person, as well as and they make up the governing body of that institution. And there's also an alumni and development office within each college. So each college has a development director and a team that's focused on raising money, raising alumni engagement, doing the prospect research, doing all of that work that is around engagement, if you will, or advancement. So, but that said, none of them report to me. They all report to their president and their governing body. But we work very collaboratively. And interestingly, the way the University of Oxford is set up, there is a central development office here at Oxford that is a very robust and extremely talented group of people who raise a lot of money on behalf of the university, but primarily from non-alumni, interestingly, because the colleges have said that our alumni are our alumni. We raise money from our alumni. If you want to raise money from our alumni central development office, you must come and ask our permission.
Interesting.
And vice versa, if colleges want to raise money from non-alumni, they have to come to the university and ask permission.
Oh, wow.
And invariably, either one can say, no, I'm so terribly sorry, College A or Magdalen. You cannot go and talk to Bill Gates because we already have a relationship with Bill Gates and we have a gift that's in the works with Bill Gates. So I'm sorry, no. Or the reverse, if Bill Gates had gone to Magdalen, and if we'd gone to Magdalen to say, could we talk to Bill Gates? And they very well could say, no, I'm sorry, but we're about to ask him to fund our new science center. So it is a real negotiation around that.
Sure.
And one of the best outcomes is when we go to a prospect together, when we go together to a potential donor and say, we, the university and X college here, have an opportunity for you to make a difference, to have an impact. And here is what that looks like.
Wow.
But it is everything is a negotiation. Yeah.
That I just think that's fascinating, and what I want to get to, Christine, is first of all, how long you've been in your role as the director of alumni relations, and what was the learning curve for you, professionally coming into Oxford. If we can step back, you had a very similar role at Harvard Business School. That's how we worked together years ago. So yeah, if you can just talk through those pieces of your tenure and that learning curve, please.
Sure. So I got here in March of 2012.
Oh, wow.
And so it's been a lovely, it'll be 12 years in March. And it is just amazing how quickly it's gone.
Yeah.
And when I arrived as the director of alumni relations, so I moved from the executive director of external relations at HBS, which was overseeing the fundraising as well as the alumni relations side, as well as the sort of alumni communication side, as well as all of that wonderful administration that goes on behind the scenes that no one sees, but is so critically important. So I went from that to, and that was managing basically 80 some odd people of you.
Yes.
To managing a team of 15 in the alumni office at Oxford. It's a tiny shop, tiny.
Okay.
With a focus on alumni relations only. And the alumni relations shop at Oxford is very separate from the fundraising shop. And that is because, as I said a moment ago, the Central Development Office raises money from non-alumni. So it would be very odd for me to report into the development office when the people I represent are not their constituency.
Yes.
So luckily, and it's wonderful, this separation, I think, because it means that the work I do feels very grounded in engagement and doesn't have a price tag associated with it or an expectation.
Oh,
of a
yeah.
price tag associated with it. So So there is that. But that said, I walked into this job thinking that I was perfectly suited to this, because having come from Harvard, where it was every tub on its own bottom and very decentralized, I knew how to negotiate across all of those different constituencies. And I was feeling very confident that I could do this in an English institution as well. Sort of like, where do you go after Harvard? Well, you go to Oxford. But it was so challenging. First of all, 39 different colleges, just trying to figure out which college is which and what makes each of them different and all of this. That took me forever. But then it was the incredible, the ancientness of this university. So it's 900 years old.
Wow.
And much of what you saw in the Queen's funeral in terms of the pomp and circumstance and the sort of protocol that they went through, all of that happens at Oxford every day, whether there are, ancient committees, or whether it's, our honorary degree ceremony is conducted entirely in Latin, or it's, the chancellor enters into the room for a major celebration or ceremony with a page who's holding his gown. I mean, all of that stuff was just very new, and I had never experienced that before. Plus, just the bureaucracy, Tim, the number of committees that you have to go to get permission to move something forward. One of the things I was so unappreciative of at HBS, but boy, I was the minute I got to Oxford, was the speed with which decisions could be made, and the ability to kind of rustle up the support, both financial support for something, as well as the kind of psychic support from your colleagues to get stuff done. Whereas here, it's very consensus driven. You have to go and ask permission and bring people along with you. And it's just endless committee meetings. The other thing is papers. I hadn't written a paper since I was in college, for goodness sake. And suddenly I was expected to write papers for everything, to present my ideas to any of these committees, or, we would have these minutes after these committee meetings that were incredibly detailed, that had to be gone through line by line by line item in terms of approval of the minutes before any committee meeting could start. I mean, it really, I gotta say, it's incredible what that does to you in terms of it kind of paralyzes you. And maybe, in fact, I remember the vice chancellor is the person who runs the university. The chancellor is sort of in name, they are the official head of the institution, but they don't have any real authority to get stuff done. It's the vice chancellor that's the real, where the rubber hits the road. And I remember the vice chancellor, when I started, his name was Andy Hamilton. He's now the president of NYU. And I said, Andy, how do you do it? How do you read all these papers before every committee meeting? And how do you prepare? And he said, Christine, the best thing I can say about it is it slows me down. It slows me down to really be able to think about something and to really think hard about it before I make decisions. I thought, well, okay. I guess I see that, but I think it's a real, I don't know. I will be interested to see how we are getting a new vice chancellor in January, and to see if it's possible for her to make any changes. Now, I will say this, we've just come off of a period of time, the last 2 years with COVID and all of this, where Oxford University's status has risen exponentially. We have been part and parcel of the development of the vaccine for COVID. And a lot of the work that we've done with AstraZeneca has been around distributing that vaccine around the world at cost, not profit making. It's been the most amazing feature in burnishing our image as an institution. And I think it's done a lot for research universities in general, in that it's shown us to be not simply the ivory towers where researchers or academics disappear and study the most arcane, ridiculous, narrow little subjects, but it's where people are doing research that is making a difference in the world. It's the classic Kim Clark, little
Yes.
moniker, leaders who make a difference in the world. Well, this university went so far down that route of really, I think, changing its image as an elitist institution to being one that is, yes, an elite institution, but one that is producing the most game-changing solutions to big problems. So that's been fantastic. And this current vice chancellor, who's about to segue out of her job into being the chairman of the Carnegie Foundation, she's done a remarkable job of leading us through that period of time and shepherding the resources required. So for an ancient institution that has thought of itself as being slow to change and hard to navigate, we've done a lot in a very short space of time to change. So it's been great.
That is really cool. And I like that sort of dichotomy where you mentioned it's an ancient institution, yet it can be nimble enough to really get going on the pandemic, fostering research for the vaccine, getting it out at cost. Just that's got to be such a huge ship to turn around when you have all those institutional ancient processes and committee work and taking things under perpetual advisement. That must have been really fascinating to be there to see that as you were allowed to during that time period.
It was truly a privilege.
Yeah, amazing. I just have to ask, Christine, as if you've been there for almost 10 years now, do you still have moments walking around the campus where it's like, I can't believe I'm here? Like, the hundreds of years old buildings and the gowns and the students and just sort of the trappings that I think Americans who know about English higher education, not just through movies, but maybe other forms too. It's like, do you ever just pinch yourself? Like, I can't believe I'm actually.
Pretty much every day, Tim. Pretty much every day. No, I think partly because there is no campus. This university permeates the city. So everywhere you walk, you are walking, next to a college or next to an extraordinary museum or whatever. I mean, it is an extraordinary city visually and experientially as well. It is amazing. So yesterday I was headed over to the university church to a memorial service for the Queen in my academic gown and landed in this beautiful hall where we were gathered. All the leadership of the university was gathered in order to process into the church for this ceremony. And it's everything does have a purpose and has a sort of a way of doing things that you have to follow, a protocol, if you will. And to me, it was extraordinary to be so privileged to be part of that procession. I thought, goodness me, in a million years, I never would have pictured myself here doing this. But it all feels just so right and so wonderful. And it is a privilege. It truly is. And we listened yesterday, the chancellor, his name is Chris Patton, who's the last governor of Hong Kong when Hong Kong had to transition back to the Chinese. He was the one who transitioned it and sailed out of the harbor on Britannia in tears, sobbing that, and he gave the most beautiful tribute to the Queen. He knew her very well. And so that's the other thing, is that you're rubbing shoulders with people who are right there at the coalface of this country. Sadly, I will say, and you'll see my politics on this one, we have educated many of the last prime ministers. And so there is a really strong affinity with the government and the people who run this country. So it's pretty amazing, truly.
Yes. So cool. If you could talk to us, Christine, about how this opportunity came up and what your thought process was about, my goodness, this chance to become the director of alumni relations at Oxford. moving overseas, not just professionally having that on ramp, but culturally as well. Was that exciting? Were you motivated by the challenge that would represent in all facets of your life?
Yeah, well, it was an amazing confluence of things that happened to get me here, I think. So I had left HBS, and I was really not sure what I wanted to do. I sort of thought, gosh, is it more of the same? I was doing a little bit of consulting work up at Barnard, for just to, as sort of a way to sort of stay in the game, and it was a real opportunity actually to do something for another higher ed institution. So I was doing a little bit of consulting around some reorg that was happening there. Deb Spar was the president of Barnard at the time, and former HBS professor who's back at HBS now. Anyway, so I was doing that, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. So I wanted to sort of take some time off. And so I was taking 2 weeks holiday here I'd rented an Airbnb in London, and I was just going to do things like, go to the theater and go and listen to music. And I had some friends in England that I was going to visit, and just sort of have 2 weeks of just kind of getting out of the country and just sort of shaking up my head a little bit. And as literally as I was packing, a former colleague who you will remember, Stephanie Goff, Stephanie Goff Governale, sent me an email with an attachment, a job description attached to it, saying, Christine, I've just seen this and you might want to take a look at it. It just has your name all over it. And I opened it up, and there it was. This was this job. And I thought, my goodness me, the timing could not be more extraordinary, because as tomorrow I'm headed off on a plane. So I got in touch with the headhunter over here that was managing things. And I said, listen, here I am, and here's my resume. Do you want to meet me while I'm in town? And we can just sort of, size each other up and see if it feels like a good thing. So they agreed, and I met them, and we all liked each other. And they said, listen, I think you ought to get on a train and just head out to Oxford and have an informational interview with the person who'd be hiring for this job. So I did that. We liked each other then too. So I just thought, well, I have to do this, just throw my hat in the ring. This is too much of a wonderful opportunity. And I had in my youth spent a lot of time in England. So I'd done a junior year abroad at the University of Durham back in my youth. And and every year since then, I had been coming back because my mother was a crazy Anglophile. She was not crazy, she was an avid Anglophile. And she painted a lot of this countryside, and she had very deep ties with friends here. So I came back often with her on these lovely summer holidays and things, and Christmas time and everything. So I just felt as if it was sort of home. It didn't feel like this was I wasn't moving to China or anything. I was moving to a place that I knew really well, and I felt very comfortable. I spoke the language, all of that. And also I felt as if I had the freedom to make this decision. I was single. I didn't have a husband. I had nothing that was, my mother had died. My father had died ages ago. I did have family still in the US, but I was unfettered. I could pretty much pick up and move. So I did. I sold my condominium. I sold my car. I sold stuff. I put other stuff in store. I just did it. I just did it. And I remember people saying at the time, my God, you are so brave. This is so brave. You're so brave. It's like, I never, ever felt brave. I felt absolutely entranced by this opportunity and excited. And I also had no idea what I was walking into. Let me just say that, because, all that complexity of the university and stuff, I thought, oh, this is fine. Anyway, but what's interesting, Tim, about making a decision to move abroad, and I'll be interested, other people that do this, that you talk to might feel the same way. I don't think anybody quite prepares you for what the long term is going to mean. In other words, I was just taking this job because I was so excited about it. I never gave a minute's thought to, well, what happens in 10 years time? I mean, what happens? What am I? Well, am I going to be an American living there, or am I going to want to become more English and become, an English citizen. I mean, nobody sort of prepares
Yeah.
you for that process. And I'm still kind of struggling with that, because when you leave your home country and spend a significant amount of time in this place, wherever
Yeah.
it is, you become sort of neither here nor there. You become this kind of interesting in-between person. And, you know, I am getting ready to retire. I'll probably retire next year, as a matter of
Oh,
fact.
wow.
Um, and so a lot of the question has been, you know, well, wow, what happens now? Do I go back to America? Do I stay here? What do I do? And for the longest
Yeah.
time, I was thinking, well, I would go back to America, and then, but I've built a life here. This is
Yes.
my home now, really, and I've got
Wow.
wonderful friends and an incredible set of experiences that so here, my first thought was, well, I'll go back to America for 9 months, and I'll come back here for, say, 3 months at a time and spend time seeing my friends and reconnecting with this lovely community that I've become so attached to.
Yeah.
But that didn't feel right, Tim, funnily enough. It
Oh,
really
interesting.
didn't. And I think a lot of my feeling had to do with what I was seeing happening in America. I was feeling very concerned about the polarization of the country,
Oh, definitely.
really concerned about the commercialization that was going on, just this sort of, I just wasn't sure I belonged there anymore. And I just
Wow.
didn't know that I could really support it. So
Yeah.
I've completely flipped, and I've decided I'm going to stay here for 9 months out of the year,
Oh,
and then
wow.
go back to America for, say, 3 months, maybe. Yeah, that's I
Huh.
think the plan. Yep.
Oh, that sounds riveting.
Well, it was the minute I made that decision, the minute I was sort of like, wait a minute, I think I need to do that. I could feel my shoulders kind of going,
Oh,
it was really it felt like just the right thing to do. Yeah.
that's a sign, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I could talk to you for hours
Well,
because
right back at you, Tim.
because I was struck by that sense of, you know, a person without a country, in a sense, where you don't feel wholly American anymore. And I'm right there with you about the concerns, about the sort of the political polarization, the fact that I think that a lot of people in America are treating politics like a religion now, like this is
Yep.
this is the truth and this is the one true XYZ. Um, it's a very sobering and challenging time. But also on the other side too, you mentioned wonderful friends and a life you've built there, and it goes back for a long time. So that just that internal wrestle must have been
You
interesting.
know, another thing, Tim, that I think is a real has been a real eye opener, and I didn't expect this either, is living abroad, and especially living in the UK. The UK looks out. It looks out at Europe. Now,
Mm.
granted, we made one of the most horrific decisions ever when we decided to leave the EU.
Yes.
But that said, we are on Europe's doorstep. Well, we are Europe. We're in Europe, but we
Yeah.
are in continental Europe's doorstep. And to
Yeah.
be able to literally in 2 hours' time leave here, leave St. Pancras Station, and set foot in Paris is
Yes.
amazing. And I think the other thing that is a really important thing to me, to be a world citizen, if you will, and to have
Yeah.
access to the rest of the world in a way that I didn't. You know, you'd have to work a little bit harder to do that in America. I also just was so stunned by the number of people in America who didn't even have a passport, who
Oh,
wouldn't
yes.
even think about leaving the country. Now, granted,
Yeah.
America is so huge, and so going from, you know, Delaware to Iowa feels like you're going from here to China. But I just think being so close to the rest of the world, and especially to what Europe has to offer, and the
Yeah.
richness, the cultural richness that brings to you, is just such a privilege. It really is. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I didn't put this in the draft questions that I sent to you, but as you were talking about that, it reminded me of a HBR, Harvard Business Review study, where they talked about people that spend significant time overseas. It ends up really compelling that person to have their worldview challenged. and oftentimes it's challenged in a very good way, in a very rich way. And for you now, almost over a decade there, I got to think that's been a real personal development, a shift in the mindset. And as you mentioned,
Absolutely.
like the doorstep of continental Europe.
Yeah.
Do you ever, aside from the comments you made previously about it, does that ever play into your thinking about being back in America? Is that the worldview you have developed over the last decade would be, challenged again coming back here, and not having that proximity to different cultures and such?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, the reality is the world is shrinking, and we can get places fairly quickly if we need to. And the joy is, I do feel as if I have now people to visit really all over the world almost, because of the connections that I've made from that standpoint. Now, I mean, not completely. It's not. I mean, if but still, there is, the world is more open, I feel, to me now than it probably did before. And I think I'm not sure what's going to compel me to come back to the US, other than a short, sort of a 3-month stint, to be able to see the family and friends who I do love and still have there. I still have a little house, a summer house in Massachusetts that I love dearly. So there are big pulls that get me to come back. But I honestly feel this, that when I touch down in the UK after a trip to the US, I'm always so glad to be back. I mean, whether it's the countryside that welcomes me, or whether it's the quality of life or the pace of life, or the life that I've built, it really feels like it's where I need to be. Now, as I get much older, I don't know. It's interesting, because I think, as we get older, our expectations shift and our needs shift. And I might, because I am single and don't have children, might need to feel more connected to, you nieces and nephews and things as I get older and frailer and all that. I don't know. I'll have to see. But the nice thing is, I've learned is I don't have to decide all that right now.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. I wanted to ask a couple more questions. We're almost at the 9 o'clock hour, and I'm good for a few more minutes if you are.
Yep, I think I have to have a hard stop at about 1/4 past.
Okay, perfect. Are there any particular moments in your role as the Director of Alumni Relations at the University of Oxford that come to mind, in terms of feeling like, yes, this was the right decision, or all the work we put into launching this event has made it worthwhile, because look where we're at?
Pretty much every time we do something, I think this is great and wonderful. And every time we do something, I feel is a small win, if you will, because we are really changing the way alumni engagement is perceived here. I think for an English institution, alumni were very undervalued for years. And part of that is the way people went through their university experience. They never didn't have to pay until just recently, just in the last sort of 10, 12 years, did they ever have to pay. So there wasn't, and there just simply wasn't the culture of alumni engagement and giving back and engaging with alumni as your alumni community could be your ambassadors and your foot soldiers and all that. It just wasn't really part of the culture. And so I think the work we do is really shaping a new future for the university, which is great. I love it when we get out of Oxford and get a chance to bring the university leadership and assorted people around the world to sort of remind people of their experience with Oxford, because it is enriching. That was always something I loved at HBS too, was when we would do these global alumni conferences.
Oh, yes.
You could, bring the university or the business school to a location and sort of spark the conversations that make it a special place, whether it's posing really critical questions or bringing research to people or whatever. So I think it would be very hard to pick out one thing, to be honest with you, because everything cumulatively is just so extraordinary, really.
Yeah.
Certainly the people you meet when you're in institutions like this, whether you're meeting honorary degree recipients or some of these extraordinary academics that teach here,
Mm.
you're just always sort of in awe, trying desperately not to mess it up. So no, I love the energy that they bring. I love the other thing that's been really great is uh getting out, because the idea of alumni engagement is so new in
Yeah.
Europe. I've been spending a lot of time in other institutions helping them
Oh,
understand the importance of it. And so that's been a real privilege to start to bring kind of through the institution of CASE, the Council for Advancement and Support of Education, bringing that to other institutions and getting them to sort of wake up and realize the need to invest in and support alumni engagement as well as development, obviously, and
mm.
communications and all of that stuff. That's been a
Yeah.
real privilege, is to see other institutions start to kind of take that on board.
Mm. Wow. And I love that sense of, taking the best practices that you developed and saw and helped to refine at HBS, bringing some of those to Oxford, and also now sharing it through CASE and other affiliations with additional institutions. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I mean, it's funny because as the American, there immediately there's a sense that, oh, they must have hired you to come in and put the American spin on alumni
I
relations
was
at
going to ask.
Oxford. And
Yeah.
yes, to some extent, I think they did. They saw that I had built up a career, a lovely long career at
Yeah.
Harvard. But at the same time, there's no way a Harvard model was ever going to fit onto an Oxford
Mm.
institution, because of the difference, the ancientness of Oxford, the way it's structured, all of that stuff, the cultural behavior of the people here, both internally but also the alumni. It wouldn't have worked to try to put the Harvard spin on things, or the Yale spin, or the Stanford spin.
Yeah.
But that said, there are elements of it that are definitely worth thinking about. There are certainly universal truths that we all understand. Things like coming down the pike, Tim, there are a lot of things socially and sort of culturally that we are all going to need to be aware of when it comes to alumni engagement. The rise of the Generation Z.
Mm.
They have a very different approach to their institutions, and we're going to need
Yeah.
to be really responsive to that. The rise of technology, the financial pressures that are being put on institutions these days. These are all universals that we are all going to have to absorb and take on board and
Definitely.
respond to.
Yeah.
So there are some things that I bring to the table that are sort of universal, but then there are other things that I think are unique to my experience at Harvard that can be helpful, but not, they're not going to eclipse the Oxford experience.
Well said. Yeah. Thank you. Christine, we're almost up against the time. Any last thoughts? And before we do that, I just want to say, you've been so gracious, and it's been really meaningful for me to reconnect with you in this way.
Well, and vice versa. And Tim, you're a wonderful interlocutor, as they say in this country. Because you bring such enthusiasm to the topics that you are teasing out of people, and it's really lovely. So congratulations on carving out this new little niche for yourself. I think it's really you're a terrific interviewer. So well done, you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, I would love, if you're ever game for it, after Oxford, if you have time to reflect in retirement, I'd love to revisit.
I'd be delighted.
Cool.
I could talk for England on this subject, so no problem.
Any last thoughts or comments you want to share, Christine?
I just thought one of the things that was so great, you did have these lovely questions, and you asked finally sort of, what are your favorite quotes, words, or lived experiences you routinely draw on in your job, in mentoring or in volunteering. And I thought that was just a lovely way to end, because I think there are some things that help make us good at what we do. And a lot of that comes down to some very basic stuff. I think curiosity is a wonderful quality.
Yeah.
Obviously enthusiasm is another one. I think being interested in people and being interested in institutions and what makes those institutions tick is a good one. And I think all of those things, that curiosity and maybe some creativity, as well as listening to people and caring about people, wanting to know about what they do.
Yeah.
Those are just great things in general, no matter what you do in your life. So those might be good things to sort of close on.
Yeah, I love that. And those elements are things that, I think I had internally, just speaking for myself.
Yeah.
But this stage of life, the stage of my career, perhaps halfway through my career, you talked about, taking a vacation to England, and then serendipitously there was this opportunity that Stephanie Goff mentions to you. I feel like timing does play a huge role, whether that's, the universe or a higher power or something at play. And I feel like for me, this, a similar thing has happened where I'm at this point in my life where I want to nurture that curiosity about the human element side of people in fundraising. And that's the motivation for this project. And I love that idea of, being curious to learn about other people, other cultures, the institutions, what you could bring that would be applicable. What are things that you need to leave aside? Whether that's
and Tim, what's so great about your curiosity about this, your own innate curiosity, is that what you're doing by pulling all these people together is not only are you getting enriched by that, which is fantastic, but you're a one-man band in making it, sort of paying it forward in a sense, and making that available to more people. So that's wonderful and a fantastic output that you're able to do with this. So well done. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much, Christine. I look back fondly on the time that you were the executive director of external relations at Harvard Business School. And before we went live, I mentioned to you that after every biannual, twice a year reunion at HBS, you had very, very thoughtful emails that you would communicate out to the full development team, making sure that we all knew that our shifts, that Thursday night to Sunday, that you had seen the work that we all had put into it, and we all had participated in launching these really robust and energetic and high impact alumni events. And I really appreciated the attention to detail and the thoughtfulness that you had in communicating out. Like, I recognize this was a full hands on deck, folks. It wasn't just X.
Well, it's true.
People in a role.
Yeah, it took every single one of you.
But it takes someone like you to recognize that it is a full hands on deck. Not, in my experience, not every person in a role at that level has the wherewithal or the just the ability to see that many hands went into this, and to acknowledge that was very thoughtful. So
that's very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Christine, I want to be mindful of your time here. Thank you so much. This has just been such a rich and fascinating and interesting conversation with you. I wish you all the best as you head out through the next year or so before you go on to retirement. And I would love to stay in touch with you.
Absolutely. Me too.
Yeah. Well, for my audience, thank you so much for viewing, listening to Christine Fairchild's conversation. It will be live on my website, peopleinfundraising.com, as well as on LinkedIn very shortly. And I know you'll find some great nuggets of wisdom and treasures from this conversation today. So thank you all for your support. Christine, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Tim.